Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Sheedy, President of Atheists for Liberty. Welcome to the Atheists for Liberty channel. It is spring of 2022, several months in since we had our last guest on our Thursday night streaming series. We had Dr. Ronald A. Lindsay on last time, where we had quite an interesting discussion about his background in skepticism. This has been a very popular program, though. And we wanted to make sure, after a series of reforms, after a series of improvements here at Atheist for Liberty, that we really showcased again this Thursday night series for the better, with more content, more guests, more ways to really improve how we showcase everything to you. In this new series, Atheist for Liberty will be highlighting individuals in culture, politics, and religion. As an ever-growing organization, Atheist for Liberty not only defends Enlightenment values, but seeks to learn from the greatest minds of the 21st century. We're going to be doing this once a week from now on. So sometimes I might not be the host. If I have to go somewhere, if I'm a little busy, we'll have a different volunteer or a different staffer come on in. But we really want to do this streaming series right for all of you. And this channel has grown quite a lot. Just with the first 5 streams alone from October of 2021 going into the end of 2021, we reached over 1,000 subscribers. We're monetized. We can take super chats. And there's been a thirst from all of you, members, supporters, subscribers alike, for us to keep doing this. And we're going to keep doing it thanks to all of your support and thanks to all of you really making sure that we thrive and succeed in today's culture war. The guest that I have on, I couldn't have picked a better person. We've been trying to book him for several months now as we made improvements to the streams, but his schedule was quite busy. Our schedule was quite busy. But nevertheless, I'm glad that we've been able to make this work. So before I introduce him, though, I want to give a shout out to our member of the week, TJ Tuttle. Be like TJ and become a member at atheistforliberty.org. Make a tax-deductible contribution today. $1 a month, $12 a year for just a starting membership, or you can upgrade your membership. We really appreciate any and all support, and we absolutely love to showcase our free thinker members and above once they do become members and once they do agree to support us and help us out in many different ways. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest. Dr. Colin Wright is an evolutionary biologist, the founding editor of Reality's Last Stand, and a contributing editor of Quillette magazine. He's an academic advisor for the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine. He's interested in the sex and gender debate, and his essays published in the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, The Times, Quillette, and elsewhere. He's a strong proponent of secular humanism, free thought, free speech, and academic freedom, and he is a proud member of our advisory board. Dr. Colin Wright, welcome to the channel.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
So I'm so glad that we were able to finally have you on. I know we had a bit of a kerfuffle over email and over messages with our schedules. You're a very busy guy, and you've grown quite a lot in politics, in culture. You're showcased everywhere. You're on Fox Business, Fox News. You're on various different streaming shows, from liberal to conservative alike to libertarian, because you're speaking up about a lot of major issues that impact our civilization and society today. We saw your tweets just 2 years ago when you were rightfully complaining about issues that you saw during your past in the atheist community. And around late 2019, early 2020, you were very much up and coming. But we at Atheists for Liberty were very much paying attention to you and your success and your work. But I'm thinking that's a good topic where we can really start the conversation. Like myself, you have a past within the atheist community. You were a proud viewer of various different shows and podcasts. You are an evolutionary biologist. That is your field. And I'm assuming you paid great amounts of attention to the debate of evolution versus creationism, for instance, happening within public schools and institutions several years ago. You were very, very much involved in atheist discussions back then. And so I'm thinking a good first question would be, I'd like you to discuss your background within the atheist community first. And how does your atheism, your views on religion, and being a skeptic overall, because I know in other shows you called yourself a skeptic in the best sense, how does that impact you today and your current work that you engage in?
Yeah. You guys were an early adopter, so thanks for seeing my stuff early on and inviting me on the board. It's an honor, truly. So I did sort of get my start writing publicly about the atheist movement in general. I had a blog called Warm Little Pond that was just sort of my place where I talked mainly about science, atheism, creationism, evolution, the whole debate there. I actually wanted to become an evolutionary biologist because I was reading, Richard Dawkins. I was reading Stephen Gould back in the day, and really, I think it was a Time magazine where there was like a little short back and forth between Richard Dawkins and Francis Collins, the head of the NIH right now. And Collins is, he's a sort of is he a creationist? I think he might even be. And they were going back and forth about, is God real and the consequences. And I remember reading Dawkins. That was kind of the first time where I saw like a public person talking about this. And then from like the point of view of evolutionary biology, I thought that was just such a powerful place to be arguing against religion from. So that's kind of why I became an evolutionary biologist. I started talking to people about intelligent design, and I found myself buying evolution textbooks just to sort of see what the science said about things and reading on my own. And then I figured, like, well, I'm already reading evolutionary biology textbooks in my spare time. Like, why don't I just go all in and become one? So I did. That's what I've been doing ever since, up until a couple of years ago when I left for, the whole woke takeover of academia. I think I've maintained my skepticism, my ability to, think critically about things and sort of detect woo-woo in many areas of life. I argued so much with creationists and intelligent design proponents back in the day that I saw that same sort of, I get faith-based reasoning, the sort of glazed over look that you see in like the eyes of a lot of woke people when they're talking about gender ideology and denying sex. And you see a lot of similar types of arguments that are being used. Like I remember arguing against the intelligent design people, and they had this idea of like irreducible complexity, and the eye is so complex it couldn't have possibly evolved. And now we're hearing people, the woke left talking about, biological sex is just so complex we can't even tell what male and female is. And there's not perfect one-on-one, but there's still like complexity arguments coming out and all these different things. I'm like, this is the same thing. They just don't call it Christianity. And my first article, really coming clean as an anti-woke person, is called The New Evolution Deniers, where I compared sort of the modern woke ideologies that deny sex differences or even sex itself with sort of the denial of evolution between, that we used to have attacks from the evangelicals. So that's kind of where I am now. I'm no longer in academia. I do this full time, speaking out against these ideas and using my scientific background to hopefully make my arguments as strong as possible.
Yeah, I have a similar backstory, at least in seeing similarities within various belief systems that are just absolutely anti-science, absolutely anti-critical thinking, anti-liberalism. When I got my start in the atheist community, right, a lot of us saw Christian theocracy as the enemy of reason and the enemy of the success of Western civilization in this century. And as I grew more in that community and used my skills as an activist and somebody in politics to really combat people that wanted to, put feelings over facts, I started to see the same exact behaviors coming from what we know today as the social justice crowd and the woke crowd. It made me realize that just like the religions of old that we critiqued in the atheist community as skeptics and as proponents of secularism, that the same amount of effort needed to be done when it came to combating these new religionists. And this is why I was so pleased to see your excitement back in 2020 when you heard about our organization, when we reached out to you. And this is why we're so happy every day to know that you're a proud member of the advisory board. Every time you see something of ours that comes into your feed, I know you like to like and retweet immediately because you just have always been so supportive of ours. And it's because I think we have very similar backgrounds. A lot of the staff and other advisory board members, we're really all in this same fight together, and we come from the same background where we want to fight against these bad and unscientific ideas. Of course,
it's a big problem. So, I think it's this issue I have with taking that sort of anti-critical social justice stance, anti-wokeness, is a lot of people take this stance up from like a religious point of view, where they're saying like, we need more order, we need to go back to Christian values. And here I am looking toward the atheist community. I was like, aren't you supposed to be like the rationalist, free-thinking types? And the atheist movement, as I know it, with the rare exception of Atheists for Liberty, they're bought in all to this woke dogma, and so I can't turn to them anymore. And it's like, where is the actual rational pushback that says, we can still push back against wokeness, and the savior isn't going to be a redoubling down on evangelical Christianity. Like that's just trading one horrible thing for the next. And so I really appreciate what you're all doing here, because there needs to be like a rational atheist movement that's this void of all these dogmas, whether it's woke or religious. So
it means a lot to hear that. And I try to tell people all the time, especially within these new movements and communities that we get invited to speak at against wokeism, that demographics wise, secularism and atheism is still growing. We are still going to be in a secular future here in the West. The question is do we want a secular future that promotes other dogmas and other religions, or do we want a secular future that promotes rationality and reason and the ability to agree and disagree and to test ideas and to see which ones work better and which ones don't? I prefer the other one. And the vast majority of atheists that I know of in this country also prefer the other one. We're not this loud minority that's trying to promote these unscientific ideas. And I know it's the reason why you're able to wake up every single day, just like it's the reason why I and so many others are able to do so too. So I'm very glad that this was a first segment that we were able to go into. And really, I want to jump though into how you are now able to combat a lot of these current ideologies, how you're able to attack wokeness. You do it, of course, most successfully through critiquing gender ideology. That is sort of your niche and your field at this moment in time. And a lot of people ask you about, your stances against, gender ideology, your stances against the modern trans movement or the modern non-binary movement, or whatever you want to call it, that's taken over the LGBT movement. But I'm thinking that we could go at this from a different angle. I used to be, years ago when I was in high school, back when gay marriage was a big topic sweeping the nation, I was part of my school's gay straight alliance. Even though I'm straight, I'm a heterosexual, I found it to be very important to stand up for the rights of gay people, the rights of people that happen to have different sexual orientations than my own. You can't control who you're attracted to. You can't control what sex that you're attracted to. And I saw people being treated very differently in society by people using faith as a crutch to discriminate against those holding different views. And around that time, I was in high school from 2013 to 2016. There were transgender folks too, who were being bullied and mistreated as individuals. And I didn't like that one bit. I didn't like these people, being treated like second-class citizens and second-class students. So that's why I found it to be very important for me to be in the Gay Straight Alliance. I found that to be a good thing to defend Western society and to defend liberalism and to defend secularism through that lens of helping people who just happen to be different from me. But as I started to get more active within that Gay Straight Alliance Club through the years, becoming secretary, then vice president, I started to see a growing weird sensitivity within this club. Whenever we tried to bring up religion as a reason as to why there's a lot of homophobia or discrimination against LGBT people in across the world, there was a big push and a big effort by a lot of these so-called advocates for justice to silence any dissent when it comes to those ideas, especially on the topic, for say, of Islam. Whenever I brought up that in the vast majority of Muslim majority countries, you can be imprisoned or killed for simply being LGBT. But for some reason, thanks to this belief system that these people have adopted, these activists have adopted, they've silenced even the critique of ideas that would be dead set against them. So I also wanted to ask you, from your perspective of somebody who not only critiques modern gender ideology, but somebody who has to post about it on a lot of social media, and probably someone who gets harassed quite a bit on Twitter, on Facebook commentaries, on Instagram commentaries, just for posting from this scientific perspective, a critique of this. Don't you find it to be a little hypocritical that the people attacking you the most are the people that will defend the very belief systems too on the opposite extreme of the political divide and political spectrum that are dead set against them, literally?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, I guess what was this sort of nation wokeness, I guess, was this cultural relativism. This is like we construct our morality, and we can criticize, sexism here in the West, but like, just because people in another country, they have brown skin, it's okay if they do it, or we can't comment on it. It's this, the bigotry of low expectations, where we're holding people to a different yardstick of morality based on just the color of their skin or these other characteristics. I see that as just being bigotry in and of itself. Like, no, if we're going to say that things are good or things are bad, like, these need to be universal. But we've seen this increasingly doubling down on this sort of relative truth or cultural, relative. First it was, cultural relativism. Now it's just relative to the individual experiences based on your intersectionality scores and whatever you have. So we do see this inability of people based on their political allegiances to make very similar, or make a claim that is perfectly in line with their ideology, just because there's a perceived political cost that they might be paying. I mean, one instance is this that is blowing my mind in recent years, is the complete abandonment of women's rights because they can't tell you what a woman is anymore. So like, I'm seeing people like Leah Thomas, who's this biological male who's competing and just won the women's NCAA Division I women's swimming championship. I'm seeing this as like, this is just like rank sexism. Like, if there ever was patriarchy, like, that's it. And we can't get the whole liberal feminist movement to look at. They're embracing it. They're rushing to Leah Thomas's defense, which is, this is a biological male that is taking all the awards away. So I try to use their own values or their purported values against them. It's like, aren't you for women's rights? Like, this is a violation of everything you hold dear. You should be agreeing with me. And maybe it's persuasive to some, but I mean, they're at least publicly not seeming to.
And coming at it from the atheist perspective, I know you've spoken a lot in the past too about atheism plus. The very people who came into atheist spaces saying that there are women who feel uncomfortable. There are women who are not given spaces for them. There are women who are not being treated with respect for the women's rights activists that they are. It's funny how those people who injected wokeness within the atheist community, saying that there needs to be safety for women and there needs to be respect for women, even though there was already, are complaining, are not complaining about what's happening when it comes to this radical ideology within the LGBT movement now. It's very interesting, and in a way, the thing that stinks the most about this is that I feel like it's to their own detriment. It's to their own detriment, and some of them would much rather prefer to allow it to happen than to admit that those evil bigots like Colin Wright were right from the start about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is to their own detriment. I mean, I criticize it not because I want the left to go away. I mean, I consider myself, in many ways, still do on the left. Political compass test I even take a week ago put me squarely on the left. I'm trying to just like make my own camp better. Like, I valued what the left had for my entire life up until recently. So I criticize them because I want them to be better. And I see a lot of dangers on the right too. And there's bad parts on both sides. But any dissent is just, you're exiled now. So I recently read an article that commented me, and it called me a far right commentator or something on it. I was like, point to me my right-wing view on literally anything, or at least far-right view. So it's completely
it's rather unfortunate. I know you've been speaking out too about the fact that you get invited onto Fox News, and of course when you get an invite onto a national network like Fox, what are you going to do, deny it? Like, oh no thanks, I don't want to go on that right-wing network. Of course you're going to go on,
well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy they have. They call me right-wing, and then I say, okay, well, I'd be happy to talk on a left-wing show to all people on the left. I'd prefer to be on MSNBC. I'd prefer it if the New York Times would publish my essays. But then they don't. Like, I'm getting in, the Wall Street Journal, and then Fox has me on, because my options are go on right-wing shows or stay in this room and stare at my wall and have no one hear what I have to say. But then they just see me on Tucker Carlson, and then that just reifies in their mind that I'm this right-wing figure. So you can't really escape the accusations.
Yeah, you're doing what any classically liberal science communicator, like Richard Dawkins, for instance, would do. Go on to shows when they're invited to educate as many people as possible in society. You're not doing anything that is so different than what plenty of other people in your positions and in my positions have done in the past too. And I think that's also a good way to segue into this next thing. You understood this more than a lot of other people, and you wanted to showcase that quite so to the general public. Around 2021, you ended up making a drawing showcasing your stance your stance on the political spectrum here. This I find to be very hilarious. There's you as the 2008 liberal, being slightly to the right compared to I guess a more progressive liberal. I don't know what you want to call them, but clearly showing that you're not on the political right. You're not on the political right. The line's right there. You are to the left of that. There's literally a blue line. You're standing right on it. But of course, you're an evil conservative Republican now. And then, of course, you have the second line in 2012. Right when some of these communities, right, started to go amok, Atheism Plus and a lot of other things. You have the other liberal running far to the left, you sticking to your values, but all of a sudden, that middle, that nice divide between right and left, you're right about to cross that border. And then, of course, in 2022. You are now an evil right winger. You have changed your views somehow, even though you have literally held the same positions you have always held. It's very unfortunate, but I'm glad to see that other people are seeing what you're talking about, especially through this drawing. Elon Musk, who recently acquired Twitter, or he's about to acquire Twitter, right? The deal has been signed. It has been made. He ended up retweeting this cartoon. And I'm very glad that everybody is giving you the credit that you deserve for making this. We actually, in that drawing, there is Colin Wright's Twitter handle @SwipeRight. You guys can go follow him there. I think this really showcases a frustration that a lot of other people have, that a lot of our own followers and supporters and members have. I remember seeing this as well through an atheist movement lens. When Elevator Gate happened, when Atheism Plus started to happen, I ended up sticking, and later on, once I got more into the movement myself, I stuck to my same views. I'm still a secularist who's against Christian theocracy. I don't want 10 Commandment statues on public government property. I'm in favor of people being treated equally and freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Nobody using their own religious dogma to make legislation in a secular nation. But simultaneously, I was willing, of course, to critique the Islamic religion like the Christian religion. I was willing to see unfactual things when they were coming into this movement 10 miles away. And of course, what ended up happening to myself and to plenty of other atheist activists is that we ended up staying where we were on the spectrum, but a lot of our own fellow so-called free thinkers, fellow so-called skeptics, they ended up, landing on the other extreme, criticizing us for being right-wing now. Or being anti-secular now, right? Because we have some people as well who have always been conservatives and libertarians, but have been staunch secularists. There's been this influx of hatred against fellow atheists and against fellow secularists, agnostics, and free thinkers for staying in the exact position as to where they always were, and caring about secularism and caring about Enlightenment values, caring about free speech. But all of a sudden now, we're evil, we're bad. We've somehow changed. When I would argue that people like you, people like me, and people like the vast majority of atheists haven't. That's at least me from the atheist lens. It's been frustrating to me for several years. So when I saw this drawing, Colin, I really resonated with it quite a bit. And I'm very glad to see that the vast majority of people online, at least normal people online, right, are seeing it that way too, especially the new owner of Twitter.
Yeah, it's got, I think, close to 260, maybe over 260,000 retweets, and last I saw 1.6 million likes on Twitter. I don't even know how many impressions that would be on Twitter, but I mean, it's got to be an insane number. So that at least shows there's a signal there that this cartoon that I just made one night in my pajamas just for fun, to sort of I was just working through my own sort of feelings of where how I view myself politically, where like the ground had shifted beneath my feet, and now I'm perceived as this right-wing figure, even though, you know, my values haven't changed. It's just where on the political landscape I see my values now best reflected. And, you know, and it's not even on every single issue. The biggest criticism of the cartoon people had was just like, are you saying the right stood completely still through all this time? And it's like, well, one, it's a political cartoon. It's not a dissertation. Like, the complexities of politics and human behavior, and like it cannot be encapsulated in this little two-dimensional, you know, left-right thing. There's going to be infinite dimensions, and you know, there's probably different ways you could draw the cartoon that would paint a very different picture. But really, this cartoon was, I guess, really around three main issues that I felt were just really core values for me. One of them being free speech, where I would always been, you know, as an atheist, I mean, that's always been the atheist tool belt is, you know, we need to have free speech because, you know, in times when religion can become overbearing, it's a way to speak truth to power. And that had been something that has been decidedly like a left-wing view, at least when I was growing up. Now we see a lot of people who are on the left, a lot of woke progressives, you know, they'll use free speech in scare quotes, or they'll say so-called free speech. And they know, like, they talk about it derisively as like a right-wing talking point. So it's like, that's weird. And then on the issue of sort of, I guess, race relations or racial issues, what I see myself as upholding the views in the Civil Rights Act and the Martin Luther King Jr. statement to judge people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. That to me was like a left-wing view, and now this has been replaced by identity politics and you know, prioritizing group interests over individual rights. So there's the whole critical race type thing. That's a big issue. And then women's rights. You know, we can't even talk about what a woman is anymore because it's been replaced by an identity instead of biology. So now we see, like, for instance, abortion is a big talking point right now because the Supreme Court seems poised to overturn Roe versus Wade. And we see these editorials coming out in like the Washington Post who don't even use the word woman once. The ACLU can't be, you know, they had a list of like 6 things, and it was like young people are affected by abortion, you know, minorities, LGBT communities. Like, how are gays and lesbians affected?
Why not women? How about just one answer? Women being affected.
Yeah, so there's no mention of women. Like, they're distancing themselves from this. And so these are some 3 main core values, and they're just no longer a part of the left in any meaningful way right now. And so, you know, I try not to look in terms of, you know, tribal red versus blue. I just sort of stand back and look at the political spectrum and say, where do I see my values best reflected? And right now they're, you know, just because of how bonkers one side went, at least on these 3 issues, my values are more reflected sort of center right now, I suppose.
I could tell as well by the mannerisms in your voice right now, a mix, if I had to guess, of disappointment in some of these lunatics, but also like I don't know, a way to just showcase, you know, you're showcasing the lunacy of these people in a way that where we, you know, have always seen gender, we can kind of laugh together and see almost how insane some of these people have gone in pushing policies and pushing through education, this ideology, this divisive ideology. So I think you're kind of sick of it sometimes, probably, when you wake up and you see that sometimes things are getting worse, that another institution has crumbled to this ideology, another, you know, another publisher or another media outlet has caved, another corporation has instituted wokeness as its policy. It's like atheism plus every day, every night, and you know, you have to do this for a living. But as you cited with Elon Musk and that one retweet getting millions of likes and millions of retweets as well, do you think that there is a potential shift that could be happening, a potential turning point, whatever you want to call it, in opposing wokeness? Do you think that there's enough of us who are, you know, rolling our eyes and sounding a little disappointed in our mannerisms, right? Is there enough energy on our end now, politics, or on our end of society and Western culture, where we're really going to eventually see a real pushback and a real success on a civilizational scale against this stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're seeing a big like political reorganization going around, where the classic sort of right versus left, Republican, Democrat, this doesn't really make that much sense anymore. It's not really conservatism versus liberalism anymore. It's really just, I guess you could classify the woke ideology as being very illiberal, very authoritarian in many ways, very dogmatic, and so it's really just kind of a woke versus anti-woke. I really do think that is, in broad strokes, kind of the new organization on what we view for society. People would say that, I'm pretty much going to be voting based on my opposition to wokeness, and I don't even see it as a single issue voter. It's not like, oh, I'm just voting based on abortion, because the woke ideology, it's like a lens through which you view everything. It affects so many different things that it's not a single issue. It's like this encompassing worldview that basically makes everything crumble that it touches. The more people are talking about this stuff right now, I find myself making alliances with, evangelical Christians nowadays, because they see the problems with these things. I would have disagreed with them on topics of religion every day of the week. But I think a lot of us sort of see this greater threat, and we're just like, we're just going to table this for a second, and we're going to deal with this, because we can't even talk to them. Like, I can talk to the Christian, because a lot of them are doing, trying to do the rational Christianity thing, and they'll argue with you, and I'm fine. Like, that's great. Let's have these conversations. We're both playing this same game of using logic and reason, whereas these the woke people they're like, reason is a social construct.
It's a different language.
It's a completely different epistemology. So people are starting to get it now. I mean, the retweeting of the cartoon, I think, is a good example of where people are seeing the reorganization. And when I wrote my first articles about calling out gender ideology, people just didn't believe me when I said people were denying this is real and all these other things. And people get it now. They understand how toxic this is. And it's been snowballing, and the snowball's pretty big now. And I think we're poised to really start pushing back in a real way against this ideology.
I like how you mentioned, how you see things in the lens now of that it's not liberal versus conservative anymore, but woke versus anti-woke. And it makes me glad that we at AFL, at Atheist Liberty, have to abide by our 501c3 status, because it enables us to get atheists of various different political backgrounds together to fight against this common religion, really. And we're also against, theocracy too. We're doing a lot of the same, classic atheist stuff as well within this organization that honestly other atheist organizations just simply aren't doing much anymore. But we have anti-woke Democrats and liberals. We have centrists. We have independents. And then we have political demographics that the atheist community really didn't do much in terms of advocating for or getting into their arenas. So libertarians and conservatives as well, who are atheist, agnostics, and secularists. We're advocating for them too. And it allows us to really strengthen our numbers here, because it really is a culture war. We have to get as many people, and for this organization's sake, of the atheist demographic together in the fight with volunteers, money, state directors, you name it, and focusing on little tiny differences between liberalism and conservatism and stuff like that. It is a nothing burger in comparison to the defense, the massive defense that we have to make to keep civilization intact, because this woke menace is not going to stop unless we say no, enough is enough, and there's a unified fight, and we put our little tiny political differences aside. We're going to, of course, critique Christianity still. We're going to disagree with evangelicals still, but on the topic of, say, fighting wokeness, we'll have Christian allies, and we'll have some theist allies in that fight. They won't be in the fight with us against theocracy sometimes. It depends on the group of Christians, right, or a group of theists, but that's fine too. We'll take whatever help we can get depending on the particular battle that we're in, and that's the situation that we're in right now. And I know that for your career, just like mine and so many others in this fight, it's good that we see it through that lens, because we just have to.
Yeah. It's really funny that how like the people who always are championing the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, they're like the least diverse. They're diverse in like the most superficial ways imaginable. They have people with all different shades of skin, because they're purposefully getting people like that based on just these immutable characteristics. Whereas I can honestly say that the anti-woke crowd, if that's what we're going to call it for simplicity, they're truly the most diverse group of people that I've ever met. There's old and young, black and white, political differences galore. And it's such an enriching experience to be in this space, because I'm seeing different perspectives every single day based on my alliances with people coming from all walks of life. It's given me a really new appreciation for, like, the value of like real diversity that actually matters, and diversity of opinion and background, and how they're gonna as ways to point out your like intellectual blind spots, rather than just having this veneer of diversity, but everyone is thinking the same way. So it's been really great.
And speaking of that bad diversity, or this fake diversity, this diversity of look instead of diversity of thought and diversity of actual background, I think this is a great way to unfortunately segue into the last main question, or last main topic I'm going to get into with you. We can put up the graphic here. Not to get into too much drama as an organization, this is something that we usually do not like to do. Just to go into some background myself. Well, if we could we'll go back there first. Yeah. So I am a former assistant state director, former local partner leader, and former student leader as well of an organization called American Atheists. They were founded decades ago, more than half a century ago, by the most hated woman in America. Her name was Madeleine Murray O'Hair. This organization was known as the Marines of the Free Thought Movement. Over a decade ago, they were putting up religiously provocative signs in order to advance atheist normalcy in this country, to kind of pull the Overton window in our favor as atheists. And I was a proud supporter of American Atheists. I've done a lot of work for that organization, and I even to this day keep an old American Atheist membership card from the days when the movement was healthy, because I am very proud of my start in this movement through these legacy organizations. You have a little quote back here from Madeleine Murray O'Hair that says, "An atheist believes that a hospital should be built instead of a church. An atheist believes that deed must be done instead of prayer. An atheist strives for involvement in life and not escape into death. He wants disease conquered, poverty vanished, war eliminated." And I agree with this quote wholeheartedly. It's why, even though American Atheists is unfortunately a different organization than it is today, I, as the founder and president of this organization, Atheist for Liberty, do take this quote and the former activism of our good predecessors into effect every single day. Unfortunately, with my old job and that old organization, American Atheists, it has definitely changed in comparison to the Marines that it once was. You have American Atheists. They had their 2022 national convention a few weeks ago in Atlanta. And they had a speaker there. Her name is Mandisa Thomas. I've known Mandisa for many years, actually, when I was a local atheist leader. I have no quarrel personally with Mandisa. Mandisa Thomas is the founder of an organization called Black Nonbelievers. I actually kind of agreed with the early mission of that org too, which is to say that in the Black community, especially in the United States, there's a lot of religiosity. And if you were Black and you were an atheist, in certain communities in this country, it was hard for you to come out as an atheist because you'd face a lot of stigma, from family members and friends. And so I actually originally supported that organization, and a lot of us in the movement did. But as Black Nonbelievers grew, the talking points started to evolve into, not only do we want to make it okay for you to be Black and for you to be an atheist in the Black community, but we're going to make claims that there's a systemic racism that is occurring within the atheist movement. And not only that, you all need to be shamed for it. And so I hate to say this, but Mandisa was platformed based on the slides that we know and based on everything that we know currently so far. Mandisa was basically platformed at this convention to say to the atheist movement, you're still racist, you're still systemically bad. You have American Atheists tweeting out, Mandy0904 calls out the racism of the All Lives Matter crowd. I didn't know that was an atheist issue, Colin. Yes, all lives matter, but all lives don't matter unless Black lives matter, she explains. Here's 9 more ways nonbelievers can uphold WS. I'll just say that acronym. And I saw this, and a lot of other people who used to really support this organization with money, with time, people of all backgrounds, races, genders, orientations, backgrounds, you name it, geographic locations. A lot of atheists, I would argue people that represent the majority of atheists in this country got rightfully upset at this. This is not the American atheists that I used to support. And I hate to say this, you know, if Nick Fish wants to give me a call any day to say that he wants to work with AFL on issues we can agree on, I'd absolutely say yes. But I doubt I'm going to get that call, because the claim I make now, and the claim that many of us make, is that these legacy organizations that have existed for a very long time are not doing the classic atheist activism that united us together, that made these organizations exist in the first place. And instead, they want to promote intersectionality. They want to promote gender ideology. They want to promote racial division. They don't care about the diversity of thought that really made the atheist community enriching. They care about gender quotas and racial quotas, and you know, calling out a movement that has been so supportive of everybody coming in for many years. So I saw this, I commented on it. A lot of AFL staff and supporters commented on it. A lot of us did. But then there was a follow-up tweet that I ended up seeing as well. We can showcase that now. Colin, you ended up getting involved in this too. And I'm very glad you did. I think you made a wonderful counter tweet to American Atheists. And you say the following: do any major atheist organizations even talk about atheism anymore? Because their primary obsession appears to be with mainstream left-wing identity politics, with atheist issues riding sidecar or left out entirely. The only atheist org keeping it real is Atheist Liberty. I'm very, very glad that you made that tweet. It's actually thanks to you, by the way, that we ended up gaining around 300 followers on Twitter during that weekend. And
so
funny
glad.
thing, Black Nonbelievers, right? If there is, if Black Nonbelievers has been so successful in calling out a real racism or a real problem in the atheist community, you would think that there'd be a lot more support. They've been on Twitter for over 10 years now, or nearly 10 years now at this point. They joined Twitter in 2012. They're only at 6,700. I'm 23, about to be 24 years old. I don't have any support from these legacy organizations and much of the infrastructure that they have, but it's because of the demand to see actual atheist activism, actual non-woke atheism, where we've gone to over 5,000 followers, and we've only been on Twitter since 2020. Really shows you where the demand is. And you, representing, I would argue, the majority of atheists left and right, calling this stuff out, you got us 300 followers over a weekend. And that really shows you where the demand is. It shows you the anger that many of us have against, you know, what these organizations have become. And I want to thank you for backing us up and for standing for your principles from one classic atheist to another.
Yeah, I mean, no problem. I'm so glad that I was able to get you a windfall of followers there. I mean, I went on the American Atheist Twitter, and I just wanted to look like, what are they talking about on this on their stream? And it was I mean, every once in a while there'd be like some atheist related thing, or usually atheism wasn't like the subject of the tweet. The tweet, it was sort of, again, yeah, it was writing sidecar to some identity politics issue. It was upholding, you know, Black atheists or, you know, trans atheists, something like that. But it's really turned into this movement where, you know, atheism is just a kind of a box you tick to join the movement, but it's really like primarily just like woke Democrats who happen to be atheists. Like it's
and that's not the reason why I joined the movement.
Yeah,
you know, I didn't join to just be like atheist people who happen to be godless who are progressives. I joined an atheist movement to focus on atheist issues.
Yeah, this is what happened with the whole Atheist Plus thing. I know you're really familiar with, because I mean, I was there during that whole upturn, and you know, I was always very pro LGBT and, you know, women's rights and things like that. But I just sensed that they were trying to reorganize the atheist movement around that, and again, atheism sort of just a peripheral concern. And it's like, no, I think these are important issues, but that can't be like the main thing that an atheist organization talks about and still call yourself an atheist organization. Like, atheism needs to be front and center and why it's important. And, you know, it can certainly relate, and we can touch on related issues, like about how, you know, the religion impacts things like gay people in the United States and even more abroad in, you know, Muslim majority countries, for instance. But that can't be the main focus without you know, forfeiting your right to be called an atheist organization altogether.
And it really comes to show, I don't know how, I say this nearly on every stream, but it really does come to show. Um, I'm a big fan of the Reason Rally and its place in American history. I always think of the fact that 30,000 atheists showed up at the Washington Mall in the rain, in the cold, over 10 years ago, on March 24th, 2012. Compare that to the rally I was at, the 2016 rally, when I was really excited to go there. I was in high school. I was just about to graduate. I had my resume, and I saw only like a few hundred people tops show up because they prioritize social justice over atheism. It's not us being like these anti-woke activists trying to inject our views into atheism. First, I would argue that we are speaking on behalf of the majority of atheists, the atheists that didn't want to see social justice prioritized over atheism. That's why 30,000 atheists didn't show up in 2016. And that's why like 1,200 to 2,000, atheists, whatever large gigantic number showed up to the American Atheist Convention in 2012. That same number didn't show up to the American Atheist Convention in 2022.
Yeah,
Because of this.
It's so counterproductive to make atheism a partisan issue is what they're doing, because I mean, there's people on the right are Republicans or are atheists as well to some degree, maybe less so, but you would think that they would be really happy that there is an organization that would be, maybe leaning right, that would be championing atheism and within those movements, because wouldn't you hope that your values and your beliefs are reflected across a broad political spectrum, rather than just in a very small niche of like woke progressives? They're really limiting their reach. That's why I think Atheists for Liberty has a huge opportunity, because atheists exist everywhere. They're right, they're left, they're center. So yeah, we have a real chance to form a big coalition who are actually, with the thing they share in common is atheism and free speech and the importance of all those.
Exactly. Just like you were being the same evolutionary biologist that always stood at that same place on the spectrum, I'm being the same atheist activist that wants to see atheism normalized in American politics. If for some imaginary reason atheist activism started to become more popular in like 2005, 6 on the right than the left, and all of a sudden we had a congressional free thought caucus that was only made of, say, Republicans or conservatives or libertarians, I would want to put just as much energy then onto getting the other side of American politics secularized too. It just happened to be the opposite situation here. If our goal is atheist activists, atheist organizers, educators for secularism and skepticism and reason want to really hold up to what we claim to be doing, which is being non-biased and normalizing atheism and normalizing these things all throughout American society, American politics, let's really, put our money where our mouth is. I don't consider my work, just like you don't consider your work, to be any different than our work from 5 to 10 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. I want my views reflected as in many places as possible. And I want to speak to those people as much as possible. What we're seeing is like just a one-way communication here, where you're opening the tent to try to include everyone. And then you have, that narrow band on the left that's saying, we're not even going to talk to you people. And they're doing it, I think, for the same reason like an evangelical Christian wouldn't want to talk to you guys, because there's a religious difference there. And I do view the whole woke stuff as, maybe some religious anthropologists might quibble over the definition of what is and isn't a religion, or is it a cult, but it's very religious in nature. And I think the same pushback you're getting from them is the same pushback you would get from just like a dyed-in-the-wool faith head on the right.
I think that's why so many atheists are also flocking to this fight as well, and to this organization. It's the same old religion debate, just more different religions.
It really is.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much. That was a great round of questions. Really appreciate once again you coming on here. Let's get to answering some live chat questions and some potential super chats. I really appreciate, by the way, all of you showing your support. Become a member at atheistforliberty.org today. Sign up. Only $12 a year, billed at $1 a month for the starter membership. And of course, you can upgrade and get more benefits. We always love to showcase you guys. We always want to improve. Thanks to all of you. And we really appreciate any and all help. Continue to like us on social media as well. So we'll start with our first question from our friend Ruin of the Gods. He's a great secular, atheistic, and liberty-minded YouTuber. Love his stuff. You guys can go check out his channel too. He posted an early question. This is to you, Colin. What are your main concerns with gender ideology from an evolutionary biologist's perspective?
So I first approached the whole gender debate, not really concerned with gender ideology per se. I just saw a lot of people who were confused about what biological sex was. And so my initial foray into this was just like, oh, some people are wrong about this biology. Let me just clear a few things up and that'll make everything better again. That turned out not to be the case. So I think my problem with gender ideology really is that it tells people that there is a difference. Well, it does many things. There's a difference between your sex and your gender. It says that, whether you're a man or a woman or a boy or a girl relates completely to your gender identity, which when it comes down to it, it boils down to just you're identifying with either stereotypes or just these sexist social roles that people enforce on other individuals based on their sex. So there's that aspect. I think it really confuses people, especially children, about the relationship of their personalities to their bodies. Where if you have a tomboy, so a female who's presents more masculine, has more masculine type of behavioral set, we're telling them that essentially either they might be trans or something. Their gender identity would be called into question. It confuses them about their bodies. Maybe you should be on puberty blockers now because you seem to be confused about the relationship of your biology to your the way you perceive yourself, rather than saying just the straightforward biological fact that males and females, they're these distinct natural categories. They're not that doesn't mean that there is no overlap in other traits. I mean, for personalities, for instance, while there may be these average differences in clusters of personality traits that can distinguish males and females on average, and broadly speaking, on every single personality trait, there's broad overlap in the traits between males and females, where you can be 100% super masculine female and still be a girl or a woman, and you can be a super effeminate boy or man and still be a man. I think it relies on stereotypes and also confuses people about whether or not they have a medical condition known as gender dysphoria.
And I remember when the trans movement really started gaining steam in the early 2010s, the understood, you could say, liberal notion that was made about it is that there was a very, 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 very tiny percentage of the population in the world that has this disorder. Obviously, there was a social movement to make it where if you happen to have this disorder, that we treat you with respect, we treat you with dignity, but we treat you as if you are part of that very tiny demographic, that we don't have to overhaul all of society into, as if 50% of humans had gender dysphoria or 25% of humans had gender dysphoria, all because we want to look good. I make the comment all the time from that gay straight alliance high school experience that it's like we have overhauled and engineered all of society to cater to being gender non-binary or being able to change your gender or even change your sex whenever you want, just because we have this moral feeling of not wanting to bully the trans kid in the hallway. I think that's really what's happened, and so many people have taken the bait because of that over a very, very small demographic that deserves respect, that deserves to be treated with dignity and with equality of opportunity, but not where we should change definitions, not where we should engage in things that end up harming equality and harming the society we live in that enables people to live with dignity and equality in the first place.
Yeah. I wrote this article for the Wall Street Journal called "The Dangerous Denial of Sex," which could also be titled like the dangers of gender ideology, which, talked about how it influences women and women's rights. Where if you're saying that being a woman is all about identity instead of your biology, then it makes any sort of sex-based right impossible to enforce. It's why you see people like Leah Thomas competing in women's sports and males being transferred to female prison. It also really affects the LGs and Bs, because gender ideology has rejiggered what it means to be gay. I mean, they no longer define being homosexual as being attracted to the same sex. It's now being attracted to the same gender identity. So if my girlfriend in the next room were to just suddenly walk in here, change nothing about themselves, and just say, by the way, I'm identifying as a man right now, I would be in a gay relationship, literally. And so, I mean, we're all basically gay or even pansexual upon this ideology, because
Yeah, I bet you feel really great about that.
yeah. If you find someone attractive just by seeing a picture, you don't know how they identify. Like, they could identify as an inanimate object and you'd still find them attractive. Like, we're so definitely not attracted to gender identities because it's a cryptic trait you can't tell about people. Yeah, maybe you get to know someone, you'll find them more attractive and learning more about them. But I mean, if we're talking about just looks, I mean, you're not initially attracted to people based on the state of their brain or things like that. And I talked about how gender ideology harms children as well by confusing them about sex and their body's relationship to their personalities.
All right. Next comment or question. What did you mean by bad? What did I mean by bad diversity? I meant diversity of looks, judging diversity only by skin color or sexual orientation, rather than people's actual opinions. I think it's more enriching to see people as individuals and to see people for the ideas they come up with, rather than just the pigment of one's skin or any characteristics that you can judge just by looking at them. All right, we got another question. Since trans persons are humans, humans have rights to have freedom and autonomy. Wouldn't you say that the only rights trans persons have are just human rights to freedom? If so, why so?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We have individual rights, and you can't discriminate against people based on certain immutable characteristics. I've posed a question on Twitter several times now, and it always does really well because I never get a coherent response to it. And my question is something like, what rights do trans people currently not have but want, that don't require completely replacing the sex-based protections with identity-based protections? And there's literally none. Like, they have, especially with the Supreme Court Bostock ruling, they have equal rights. There's no rights a trans person doesn't have. The rights they want, though, are the rights. Well, the rights they're trying to take would be special rights to infringe upon the sex-based rights of women to have their own sort of spaces in sports and in washrooms and in prisons and things like that. And that turns into a major conflict of rights between people who are women, defined as adult human females, and people who are claiming to be women by asserting a certain identity, which is a brain state. And there's simply just no reason why we would classify sports into categories based on a subjective identity, any more than we'd make sports categories based on like religious affiliation or political party. Like, there's just no reason that we need to have washrooms based on someone's subjective identity as opposed to the body on the ground.
Good answer.
So yeah, I respect trans rights as human rights, but show me one right that a trans person doesn't have that, that I do.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, got another question. When defining women, should we expand from adult human female to adult possessing reproductive organs whose function produces large gametes? I would say no.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So people will say, it comes to the question, like, how do you define male and female? Is a question I get all the time, because people try to blur those boundaries and say, is it based on this? What's the one thing that defines whether someone's male or female? And they'll try to look, they'll say, some people actually think it's chromosomes that define what it means to be male or female. And that's actually not the case. Chromosomes hold the genes that largely send individuals down the pathway to develop into males or females. But there are males who have XX chromosomes, for instance, because sometimes that gene that sends someone down the developmental pathway to be a male can be transposed onto an X chromosome, and so you can get XX males. So basically, when we're talking about what a male or female is, it has to do with the type of reproductive anatomy that they have that's organized around the production of either large or small sex cells. Whether or not that reproductive anatomy is functional, and it's just the presence of it. So it really boils down to the types of gonads that you have at the end of the day.
I'll also say, really, I appreciate Epistivist. They've been active in this stream for quite a bit. Apparently, a big supporter of our presence on YouTube. Also made a very cool comment: "Wokeness equals a social religion." We definitely see it the same way here at Atheists for Liberty. And for those who want to see more of a fight, more of a successful victory against this religion, we could use all the support that we could get. So if you like this content, subscribe. Hit the notification bell, share this this stream, especially once it becomes a recorded video. We want as many people to see this stuff. We really want to showcase as many good thinkers as possible. Colin Wright being a fantastic pick to really kickstart again our streaming series for 2022. So we appreciate any and all support. And again, also guys, become a member at atheistforliberty.org today. Not only takes volunteerism, supports, and sharing, it also takes money. And we really appreciate any help through any means that we could get. We'll keep going for another 30 minutes or so, but really appreciate you all for tuning in. We have Justin Vicula, who's one of our loyal staff over at Atheist Liberty, does a phenomenal job behind the scenes. He wants to ask, Colin, you mentioned the word tomboy. That word has seemed to have fallen out of favor. How did we go from tomboy to non-binary in other terms?
I mean, short answer is gender ideology. I mean, I think that the non-binary identity label that people are clinging onto really gives away the game that they're playing. Because it's one thing to be like the Buck Angels of the world or the Blair Whites of the world who, they have gender dysphoria. They have this psychological condition that makes them very, uncomfortable in their sex body, and they need to go through steps and would benefit from changing their secondary sex characteristics to match, how they claim to feel, even though that's not what they literally are. So those people, I'm for like people transitioning as adults and whatever. But the non-binary category, when you ask them like what it means to be non-binary, they're not claiming that they're intersex. They're not claiming that they are sexually ambiguous in any way. What they're non-binary, the binary they're opting out of is this perception that there is this social construct of masculinity and femininity, where these social roles that are associated with one's sex, and they're opting out of that. So they literally are viewing the world, and that when someone says that I'm a man or I'm a woman, they think what these people are saying is that I identify with the social roles and expectations associated with femininity, or vice versa, with masculinity. But that's not what anyone thinks. That's not what I say when I say I'm a man. I don't identify with, masculinity 100%. We're all non-binary in a sense because no one is like a perfect caricature of masculinity or femininity. And that's the non-binary label is based on gender ideology, and it's a shame that the medical community hasn't caught up to this ideological component. Because we're now telling people who are non-binary that they're gender confused, and that this means it's a subset of being transgender. And then they're offered sort of, maybe puberty blockers are coming into the picture now so you can sort out your gender journey, all that stuff. And it's just completely bonkers. We're medicalizing people according to these old, the way we used to classify what being trans meant. Now we're reclassifying these new people, which are just, it's an ideology built up, and we're applying medical treatments to these people who really shouldn't be receiving any medical treatments whatsoever.
This was one of the issues, along with the sensitivity about religion in the LGBT debate, that really got me to early on to see problems within that community. At least from a non-scientific perspective, I guess from someone who's not really in your field, I see it as somebody who, like, very similar to how like a little boy or a little girl would pretend to be a soldier, or pretend to be I don't know, a princess or something like that. The way that it seems to be promoted from a basic sense is you can just go from being a man to a woman any day. That we have to take seriously the notion that, oh, you can just be a man and wake up as a woman next. Some stuff that we would, treat as a joke if we had children and our children said that to us, like they were pretending to be a soldier or pretending to be a princess. It's really unfortunate as well, yes, that the scientific community has not caught up to critiquing the idea of being non-binary, and also that plenty of other people that you would think a few years ago would have been safe in critiquing that term haven't done so. Because if they were too cowardly to critique this term then, 2015, 16, or 17, just imagine asking them to come out of the closet now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good questions, everybody. We'll keep them coming. Autumn Berend. Autumn, great to see you. Question, Colin, can you explain the pros and cons of community rooms, bathrooms, changing, etc.? Community meaning co-ed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're always bad. I think there's a lot of probably more men are comfortable with co-ed rooms because we don't have as much fear of violence coming from women, that we're going to be assaulted or something in a place like that where we're undressing or in various stages of undress. I mean, I think co-ed spaces can be fine. I do think there needs to be certain spaces that women and men can go to if they would like their own privacy, according to their sex. But yeah, I think in some contexts, a co-ed space could be fine as long as there's like individual locking doors and the accommodations are meant are there for people. I know I see a lot of bars now where they used to have like the men's and women's room. Now they're just like, they're all gender bathrooms, but they're individual locking spaces. So I guess they're co-ed, even though you're not coexisting in the room with someone else. I see no
depending on
problem
the
with
large
that.
corporation, some of them on a wide scale, like I was at a Chipotle recently. Chipotle and probably a lot of these other very, very large corporations now have instituted this on a massive scale.
Yeah, I think that is one potential solution for the thing. What we've seen before is a lot of times the women's room was changed into the all gender room, and then the men's room was still the men's room, which is a lot of women don't like the idea of a trans person, not even a trans person. That actually has nothing to do with them being trans. It's everything to do with them being a male person going into their spaces. And so I do think a good solution would be to have just sort of individual locking stalls and spaces so that everyone can use.
And not only that, too, the all gender rooms. Like I remember growing up in the 2000s and early 2010s, before the trans movement in certain parts of the country became really normalized. I always ended up at big restaurants or public buildings. I would see a men's room in many cases. I would see a women's room, and then I would see a third restroom, usually a single stalled room that has I forget what it's called. It's like usually the woman with the child, or it's like half man, half woman with the child. That just said restroom or all or whatever. We've had that in our society anyways for a while. And that solution has already been there. So I see no reason as to why, we can't just continue keeping things as it is, respecting the fact that there are men who want to have their own spaces, women who want to have their own spaces. And for anybody who might not feel comfortable with going into one restroom or the other, we already have that solution. That solution's been here since like the 90s and 2000s. Maybe not on a wide scale, maybe not in every building, but in quite a lot of them.
I'm for making more accommodations for people. I just there's valid reasons why I think women want to have their own spaces to some degree. So I'm all for expanding and meeting people halfway to some degree on these issues.
Another question, should we just free the markets and see whether or not females and males are permitted by the market to compete rather than let state-sponsored school sports?
I mean, there are co-ed leagues that people can join into. I think if we're talking about, if you're a private organization and you want to start a co-ed league, football or soccer or basketball team, go for it. I mean, let's see how many women want to join those leagues, because they'll essentially just turn into men's leagues. I mean, if you look at the NBA and the NFL and all these, they're actually not, it's not the MNBA, it's not the Men's National Basketball Association. It's actually a co-ed league. The NBA and all these professional sports teams, sports leagues, they are open to female athletes if they can compete. The only issue is that when we're talking about, the top 0.001% of athletic performance, you just don't get any females out there. Maybe in your grade school, like a boy is beaten by a girl pretty frequently. You tend to see it, But at elite level sports, you just will never see women beating males. It'll always be a male who's the number one athlete, just because small average differences in a population in any trait, when you look at the tails of those distributions, even a very small average difference in a group means can mean very different outcomes when you're talking about, like, when you're skimming from the very, very tippity top of performance in other contexts. So yeah, any league is just going to turn into a male only league. That's why you have the NBA, which is open league, and then the WNBA, which is for women, because if we want to see female athletes compete fairly in the league and be able to win, they need a protected category that doesn't let males into.
Yeah. That South Park cartoon from just a few years ago ended up coming true pretty quickly.
It really did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll add real quick. It is kind of a social question whether or not we value female sports. I mean, we don't have to value it. I do value it. I think that women should have the ability to compete in sports like that. But if you don't value it, then you're free to say that we should abolish women's sports. I mean, if that's what position you want to take, go for it.
We got Mars asking a great question. At Atheists for Liberty, what's your take of the idea of go woke, go broke? Is it based on confirmation bias, or is there a legitimate basis and good sign social tides are shifting? Well, I asked Colin, I asked you this question when it came to Twitter, but I'll say this from the atheist movement kind of perspective. If these quote unquote legacy organizations, right? These organizations that were literally set up to be like politically neutral, not blue or red, but in favor of normalizing atheism and building a hospital instead of a church, right? If these organizations are going to embrace, a political color rather than instead of actually advocating for atheist normalcy and the separation of church and state and skepticism over dogma, and this is the conclusion that myself and some of the other people that helped build AFL, we were going to build institutions on our own. Thankfully for Elon Musk, he ended up taking an already existing institution that did cave to wokeness, and he actually said, I have the resources to change it. That's wonderful and that's awesome. And I do think that there is a wide push now from the perspective of the majority of Americans against this kind of stuff. But I don't know if this is now the total beginning of a pushback. It's something I'm questioning myself, hence why I actually did ask that as a legitimate question in the stream. I don't know what your further take is on this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be truer and truer that if you go woke, you're going to go broke. Initially, that wasn't the case. So the organization being woke is a sort of way to defend themselves against accusations of bigotry and things like that, and they were seen as these really moral organizations who really truly care about everybody. But people are seeing through that now, and it's we're getting more polarized on woke versus anti-woke, and so any organization that's going to be just like steadfastly super woke, they're just going to be not having the business of a large segment of the population who's frankly sick and tired of that stuff. And I think an organization who comes out decidedly not even anti-woke, just woke, who's just going to start prioritizing just content for content's sake and not have these sanctimonious moral messages and all their things. Like, people I think are getting increasingly sick of that, and so I do think there will be a market correction for anti-woke and awoke organizations, things like the University of Austin. I think that has a lot of potential to really take off as an alternative. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, alternative things.
It's the kind of place I'd really actually accept interns from. If University of Austin grows and succeeds, I really do wish that institution the best.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're going to see the market correct and in favor of sort of a new non-woke organizations.
Last question by you, I guess, but more questions are fine as well. Isn't desiring to have a different body, different sex organs, the same as desiring a haircut? Like how having a bodily ideal isn't the same as thinking you have that ideal body.
It's an interesting question, but I do think there is a fundamental difference. When you look at people who desire to have like body altering surgeries, there are different areas in their brain that light up when you like scan them. I'm not too well versed in like the neurobiology behind these, but there are these regions that are the people who have gender dysphoria have them, people who have anorexia have these things because they look in the mirror and they see themselves as being fat when they're not. People with gender dysphoria look in themselves, they see their body, they just have this disconnection between what they see in the mirror and what they tend to think that they feel like. And I just don't think you'd have that same place in your brain light up if you just, had longer hair and you wanted to get a haircut. Plus the invasiveness of these treatments, or if you want to call it, like, you can just get your haircut, it'll grow back. You chop a leg off, like, we're not crabs or something. We're not going to grow another limb back in its place. It's rather permanent alterations.
Yeah, so I was about to say it just, even from someone who is not specialized in this field, it just doesn't come off as normal. Where clipping your nails and say if you get a cut on your skin or getting a haircut, that's normal because within the human body, all that grows back. Compared to these invasive treatments, some of which are altering that can't be really altered back so effectively. It's clear that one is natural and one just isn't.
Yeah, I agree.
Colin, can you explain your thoughts on the We Spa issue? If I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I've thought about that, but from my understanding, there was a trans woman who was in this spa who was, there was, I guess, in the women's area. I don't know if it was an all women's spa or if they were in the women's area of the spa, where they were walking around naked and specifically sat next to, I think there was a little girl that was in there. And it was in a women's space where, they tend not to expect, people having an exposed penis in a women's area. So I think there's a problem there of just, why are we letting males into female spaces? But then there was some sort of cover up where they thought this was, this is a hoax. This never happened. And it turns out that this actually did happen, and they were trying to cover these things up. I might be getting some of the details of that story wrong because I haven't thought about it in a while. But I think this is, it's similar to why I think sports need to be segregated, why prisons should be segregated, why women should be able to have their own places segregated by sex. And if they're not, if they are in fact co-ed spaces, that needs to be made just like abundantly clear to everyone who's going into these, just so you don't have a mother bringing their daughter into a space and who might be concerned if their daughter sees an exposed male penis next to their daughter. I can understand why they might be upset about that situation. So again, co-ed spaces are fine if everyone's aware of what's going on and they're voluntarily opting into these spaces.
Mars asks, good to see you again, Mars. Did that really happen for Netflix? Woke to broke.
I don't think I know the whole Netflix story that well, actually.
I could only guess.
Did they say they were going to do more woke messaging, or did they just? I thought they changed like some of their policies where they weren't letting people they weren't letting kids to jump on their parents' thing, and they're trying to charge people more money. I can't remember if there was actually a woke angle to the Netflix story.
I can just judge from my experiences. I know using Netflix over the years, they had on the front, right when you log in, there was black shows or black experience shows. They would have a LGBT category, a Latinx category, right? And sometimes they would literally showcase it right when you logged in. Not even sometimes it's just a separate category. Sometimes right when you log on. But even them having that as separate categories and having so much an abundance of it shows that Netflix has gone in that direction. I know there was also a controversy, and actually I have not seen it yet as someone who operates in the culture war. Maybe I should. I know there was a controversy that happened in late 2020 with that French film. Was it called Cuties? I think Cuties was it. I never saw it.
I remember that.
Yeah, I know there's some differing opinions even within anti-woke people about it. I know there's probably I think more of a consensus against the film. But I'm just thinking what Netflix has done that would constitute that.
Yeah, that was more just sexualizing young children type of thing. Yeah, I remember when that came out.
But good question. We have another question. I know the person who's asking this. Taxpayer money should not be going to creating all gender bathrooms in public institutions. What's your take
It's
on
a
it?
view you're more than welcome to hold, and in a democracy we can all voice our opinions, and your vote matters. If enough people don't want to donate money to all gender bathrooms, then yeah, that's an option as well.
And of course, we have a very serious question right here. This is something, of course, that needs to be answered for all to see who support this organization, real professional organization we are. Should all humans just transfer themselves into robotic mesh bodies and just welcome Skynet? That's a very, very good question.
This. I mean, we could turn it into a serious question about transhumanism or something. And I'm generally opposed to like these. We all need to be uploaded and become immortal, because there is some truth to saying that progress happens as the generations turn over and die. I mean, can you imagine if all these people who are super woke like never died, and then we're never replaced by some other, they just live on into the future? I mean, there needs to be a succession of people who are taking their ideas with them over time, and hopefully that leads to progress.
I've sort of wondered this myself. I like, we're getting off track, I think, a little bit with the Q&A, but I've wondered this myself too. Like if we're able to make human beings basically immortal, or live like to 1,000 or 2,000 years instead, we really I'm wondering how much we'd push to also become like a multi-planetary species for like, the woke, maybe woke people can have their own planet, and non-woke people can have their own planet.
Yeah. Well, if they're basing their weapon designs on equity, then we don't have to worry about them too much, because they won't be able to build good rockets. So worry about them.
Well, they wouldn't be able to compete with Elon Musk then.
Exactly. Yeah, we'd be killing it.
Who retweets good stuff and good drawings, I heard. Hey, Steve, hope you're doing well. We have a question or a comment actually from him. Many countries have all gendered bathrooms. Some even just have a group hole in the ground. But even if with stalls, I think only entitled Americans place such concern over basic biological functions. I think there's maybe a bit of truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cultural differences around all these issues. Maybe what's right in one country is not going to be right in others. They might have different social norms, and might think that a communal bathroom might not be the worst thing in the world to them. So yeah, to each their own. It's not a moral relativistic thing, but there's some things that could be more or less relative based on certain cultural differences.
Another question there is, first, why would it matter if it's natural or not? Cars aren't natural, but we don't care. Second, why would it matter if it's permanent? Tattoos are permanent, but not bad.
If what's natural? What's the...
I think it was in response to the previous question that this person asked. We'd probably have to scroll on up to get that.
I can't remember what that was. Sorry.
Oh yeah, different. The haircut question. Having different sex organs isn't the same as getting a haircut.
So I don't think I made an argument about it being natural or not. I mean, there's just a difference between the permanence of lopping off an arm and getting a haircut, and the types of if it's viewed differently neurologically of how you see yourself. I think to some degree some body modification should be allowed. I don't think you should necessarily, just because you're 18, walk into a place and say, take my arm off. It'd make me feel a lot better. But maybe if it's just like this lifelong thing and you hate your arm and it's just like becoming this, I'll leave it open to medical professionals to see whether or not they think this person, after extensive psychological evaluations, might actually benefit immensely from having an arm removed.
Or better yet, we'll invite all the medical professionals to have that discussion live on the AFL. It'll be like a real professional Zoom conference. We'd all look very stoic and host that debate right on the air.
Should this person's arm be removed? Yeah.
Yes, because that would really relate to our mission quite a bit.
Good atheist related questions we have here.
Sponsored by Atheists for Liberty. Hello, Colin. Many trans activists love to bring intersex people into their activism. My understanding is most DSD conditions are sex specific. Knifler or Swire syndrome. Hopefully I pronounced it right.
Yeah.
Aren't they?
Klinefelter.
Kleinfelter.
Yeah, there is a tactic they use to, they'll say like, well, I'll say I don't think males should compete in female sports, as Leah Thomas is biologically male, and they'll say like, well, sex is a spectrum, so what are males and females really? Because intersex people exist, and it's just like, well, just because there are people who have intersex conditions, one doesn't mean that Leah Thomas is not intersex, so they're decidedly male, and they're claiming to identify as the opposite. So it's not like there's any ambiguity going on there. And two, a lot of the intersex conditions that people are trying to claim are intersex really clinically can't be called intersex conditions, like Klinefelter syndrome and Swire syndrome, this person mentioned. Klinefelter is, I think it's, if you're, always get this wrong, it's either like XYY or XXY chromosomes. But people try to claim that like there are 6 different sexes because there are like 6 different chromosomal arrangements that create a viable human. People can be, triple X, it can be XYY, XXY. The thing is, though, if you have Klinefelter syndrome, you might have an extra X or Y chromosome. I can't remember which one it is. That's just variation within being a male. They're still males. They can father children, for instance. They produce sperm. But it is, I would say it's a DSD. It's a difference of sexual development, but this is not a new sex. Like these different chromosomal arrangements themselves aren't new sexes apart from male and female. They exist within the 2 sexes as just variations within them. I leave open the possibility that there could be someone who might be truly sexually ambiguous and they might not be completely classifiably male or female, but that would be an extraordinarily rare individual, and it still wouldn't mean that someone who's male should be able to compete against females, or that male and female are just these social constructs. Like I sometimes use like a coin flip, just because like I think they've done a study, 1 out of 6,000 times you flip a nickel might land on its edge. Doesn't mean that heads and tails no longer exist, or that heads and tails are social constructs. But heads and tails come in degrees. They don't. They're either or.
It's just like what I said earlier about how I view gender dysphoria to a degree. This 0.00, whatever the actual statistic is, by the way, I'm just stating as an example, like 0.001%, whatever it is, we are shaping our entire society based on a minority group that is so small. Doesn't mean that there are no valid arguments ever made by a group with that low of a population, of course. I agree with you on some things when it comes to meeting certain aspects of that halfway. But we shouldn't overhaul society and change everything we know about society that works if you have a population that small making a moral demand against you like that. It's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just because like there are exceptions to a rule doesn't mean that everyone is in some way an exception. Like sometimes like the rule is the rule for a reason, and that needs to be acknowledged.
Like I would make the argument that like I would like the most religiously like the most fervent religious majority country out there, like a Muslim majority country, for instance, like Saudi Arabia or Iran, for instance. I would love it. I would love that country to be atheistic. And secular. I would like these countries to be secular countries that allow for religious freedom and base their their governments off of reason and science instead of superstition. Do I genuinely think, though, that within the next few years, for instance, or the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see Saudi Arabia becoming an atheistic or secular country? No. That's why you have all the ex-Muslims instead of, yes, they are demanding to a degree that Saudi Arabia changes policies, but there's also a lot of realists there amongst the atheist population who understand that, maybe me escaping and fleeing to a nation that actually would accept me for who I am, instead of me being that 0.whatever% of the population there, to just expect automatic change. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, I totally agree
with that sentence that I could somehow complete there. But yeah. It's very true, and woke activists, they need to understand that, and hopefully, when more and more people will eventually see the ridiculousness of that belief system, and realize that we should call what works in the name of not only what doesn't work, but in the name of what doesn't work as demanded by 0.00001% of the population.
Yeah, there's only so far you can go away from reality before it snaps back. So we'll
take one more question, and then we'll stop it there, because we've had you on for quite a bit already. So Mars, we're gonna finish it off with you. Steven Pinker's blank slate indicates that we're more ruled by our biology than we may admit. If biology determines that identical twins pick up similar habits through life, are there similarities as to how we behave according to sex?
Yeah, I mean there is a similarity there. Identical twins, they have identical genetic makeups, with the exception of maybe small little single nucleotide polymorphisms that might come in there through genetic error. But I mean, I've known twins who are very much different in personality and stuff like that, because when you start off developing, the two cells, it splits into two, and they're like, that's about as identical as they're going to get. But then there are developmental things that can happen that can, maybe this next cell division and this one splits a fraction of a second before that one. And then so you have these different pathways where there is room for like error to come in there and change the outcome of things. I mean, I've seen people talk about how if you want to see just like a perfect experiment in a human being, we each have two sides of our faces. They're almost mirror images, but if you do the thing where you like cut your face in half right there and then just show if you had like the same two sides of the faces, if you've seen that, where if I made it so I was just like made the right side of my face just a mirror image of itself on the other, you would look different, because there's tiny different developmental things that happen that lead to small differences on your right versus left side. Like I have a mole over here and not on the other side. It's going to be more similar with twins, but then there's also more similarities within males due to the fact that we have similar chromosomal makeups, similar genes that are activated. But I mean, the difference between twins is going to be a lot similar, a lot tighter than any two males. But any two males are going to be more similar in their behavior than a male or any random female selected. So, there's differences, but there's also a lot of similarities. And I think it's a good question.
And I think it's a good question to also end the show, especially by a person who's been very supportive of us. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in for our relaunch of our Thursday night streams. We're going to be doing this every single Wednesday at not every single Thursday, excuse me. That was my one mistake at the screen here. Every single Thursday, folks, at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Become a member today at atheistforliberty.org. Make a tax-deductible contribution. Again, $1 per month, billed at $12 a year for the first starting membership, and we have other tiers as well. We really appreciate every single one of you showing your support for us. We really want to continue defending what is right in the new age of reason. Again, not only do we want to defend Enlightenment values, but we really want to showcase the best intellectuals and the greatest minds of the 21st century. So again, join today, make a tax-deductible donation. We're a 501c3 educational nonprofit organization. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to see more content. We have 1,000 subscribers now. We're getting monetized. This series is really going to boom. We've made a bunch of changes ever since we did our last episode in December. We now have a state director program, thanks to a lot of your demands. We have a lot of other ideas that we're going to be implementing. Rebranding. We're going to be going to numerous different conferences as well to showcase ourselves and to normalize atheism on the national level. We're going to be at Freedom Fest 2022 this July 13th through 16th in Las Vegas, Nevada. We try to do our best to do what these legacy atheist organizations can't do. We want to actually live up to what we're doing to normalize atheism and to stand for our values that the vast majority of you support. And we greatly appreciate all of you tuning in and showing your support no matter how you can. So without ado, and to end things off and to make sure we end this right in 2022, Dr. Colin Wright, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much for having me.